Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the May uh, forum, part of our No Nickel for Genocide series. Actually, I think this is our sixth one now, and we've followed the trail. First of all, showed that nickel is still a vital war material, and then followed looked at the global nickel industry, the Canadian nickel industry, the U.S. nickel industry. And what we're set up today is to look at the world's armaments industry, military expenditures, and armaments manufacturing. Um, um, my printer at home is screwing up again. I could show Adnan the results later, and he'll not be impressed. Um, so I had planned on bringing some printed copies for everybody, but we can, if we get everybody's email address or whatever, we can email the documents over. Uh, um, I have I have about 10 chapters of this done now, so it's plus that little booklet we published last year. Anyway, I'm going to read a bit here, and we can have discussion as need be. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, or CIPRI, which is sort of as far as I can see, one of the major and not the main source of research information on questions of war and peace and military spending. The world military expenditure rose to $2,718 billion in 2024. That's $2.7 trillion. Spending has increased every year in the last decade, going up 37% between 2015 and 2024, adjusted for inflation. All the figures I'm going to give in terms of it was this number and this year, and it's increased to that number in that year. They're all adjusted for inflation, so it's a real increase that we're talking about. The 9.4% increase in 2024 was the steepest year-on-year rise since at least 1988. The global military burden, that's a very important concept. The share of the world's gross domestic product devoted to military expenditures increased to 2.5% in 2024. This is the number that when Trump talks about raising the spending to 5% of GDP, he's talking about the military burden. Um, Average military expenditure as a share of government expenditure rose to 7.1% in 2024, and world military spending per person was the highest since 1990 at $334. That doesn't sound like that much, but for some countries it's orders of magnitude bigger.
Buy a lot of food.
Pardon? It would buy a lot of food, build a lot of houses, and do a number of things like that. Um, for the second year in a row, military expenditures increased in all five of the world's geographical regions, reflecting heightened geopolitical tensions across the globe. The decade-long growth in global spending can be partly attributed to spending increases in Europe, largely driven by the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, and in the Middle East, driven by the war in Gaza. And many countries have also committed to raising military spending, which is leading to further global increases. Can you go to the next page there, Adnan? Yeah, this is a chart of the 20 countries, according to SIPRI, with the highest military expenditures in 2024. Um, and the column, well, first of all, by far the biggest military spending was the US, $997 billion. The second country was China. Uh, Figures that are in square brackets are estimates. They didn't have the data directly from the government, but knowing the CIPRI as an organization, I think they were fairly reliable estimates. But be aware that they are estimates and maybe more have more inaccuracies than some of the other.
Probably conservative estimates as well.
That may be. I don't know. Um, anyway, I just want to point out that they're estimates. Um, in terms of spending as a share of GDP, the by far winner is the Ukraine at 34%, which is a huge. When we talk about Canada at 1.2%, 34%, like one out of every $3 or whatever they have in Ukraine goes to military spending as opposed to civilian or domestic spending. And also would like to point out that in this column, these figures do not include donated military spending. So Canada or the US or Germany gives $2 billion of weapons to Ukraine for a certain purpose. That's not included in that 34%. That's included in the military expenditures of the donor country. The second highest in terms of a share of GDP was Israel. And well, we're going to come across Ukraine and Israel a fair bit here. And Israel spent 8.2% of its GDP on military expenditures last year, up from 5.4% in 2015. Other countries that were high, Algeria at 8%, which I'm not sure quite why. Um, um, Saudi Arabia, which is another one of those bracketed estimate countries. Saudi Arabia, actually, that's 20% lower than it was 10 years ago. Saudi Arabia has lost a lot of oil revenues. They cut their military expenditures down, but it's still high. And then Russia, which we would expect to be fairly high, is at 7.1%. But again, that's an estimate. Um, Going down and looking at number 16 in the list is Canada. We spent $29.3 billion on military expenditures last year. That is, just a second, they're calling that's yeah, 38% increase over the 2023, if I have that. No, sorry, that's a 6.8% increase over 2023 and a 38% increase over the last 10 years. So like that 6.8%, inflation is what, 2% to 3%? It's less than half anyway of that increase in spending. Um, is there anything else there? Um, China had a fairly substantial increase in spending in the last year. It's up 7% and 58% in the last 10 years.
59.
Pardon?
59.
59, okay. But its spending as a share of GDP has actually gone down slightly. Oh, and here this last column is interesting. The share of world spending, military expenditures. The US 37%, China 12%, Russia 5.5%, Germany 3.3%, and India 3.2%. We could go down through the rest, but those are the biggies. US and China together account for almost half of global military spending. The last thing perhaps to look at on that table is Canada. Did I say this? Yeah, I said that. I did talk about Canada. Any questions or discussion so far?
See, the US is still spending more than the next 10 countries.
Pardon?
The US is still spending more than the next 10 countries combined, as a percentage anyway.
And China is less than 1/3 of what the United States.
That's why the US can't afford air traffic controllers.
Yeah. Or for that matter, we have to consider whether this is in fact efficient military spending. Because the United States apparently is running out of ammunition.
Oh.
Just as a.
Yeah, artillery and ammunition is.
God forbid they run out of ammunition.
Yeah, I mean,
I saw an article today.
That's
They're launching $2 million.
Guideline about artillery. You know that whole kerfuffle in South Korea 6-8 weeks ago? That, well, maybe it was a little longer than that. That started when Joe Biden asked the president of South Korea to send all his 155 millimeter artillery ammunition to Ukraine, and the South Korean government didn't want to do it, so the president pulled this military coup to try to get it done, but it all blew up in his face.
And speaking of low on ammunition, I guess that's what happens when you drop, $2, $3, $4, $5 million, rounds on a 50-cent tent.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the article I saw was $2 million ballistic missiles at $10,000 Yemeni drones. It's the bleed the US
Math is
dry.
hard.
Yeah.
Math is hard.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, if we look at this next chart, just the next page. This is the military expenditure per capita of the 20 highest spending countries. And I've sort of colored the ones that have the highest spending in red and the ones that have the lowest spending in green, and I've left the medium ones alone. But if you look at that chart, the country that spent by far the most dollars per capita was Israel, $4,895. So close to $5,000 per person, $20,000 per family of.
That's excluding the American military aid.
I think that is including the military aid, yes. The United States is in second place at $2,873. Saudi Arabia, well, you can expect the United States to have a high dollar per capita because they have a lot of military spending.
Israel so small, and everybody's like $5,000 a head. That's just incredible.
And that's not Israel's money. That's American taxpayer money.
Oh, but for most of it, yeah. But still, such a small country and not so much. That's just incredible.
Well, it's what happens when you try to maintain oppression over 80 years.
Oh.
And okay, yeah, Saudi Arabia again is high per capita. The population of Saudi Arabia isn't that huge, and they have these huge oil revenues, so they could buy a lot of military equipment. And yeah, and then in fourth place is Ukraine. What can I say about Ukraine? They only spent $1,659 per person. Again, they're getting a lot of military uh, supplies donated by other countries that is included in those countries' military expenditures. On the low end, the lowest of those 20 highest spending countries was China. China spent $222 per person on military expenditures last year. That's 1/12 of what the U.S. spent per capita. The figures may or may not be entirely comparable. Again, China's is an estimate, so that may be off a bit. The cost of living in China may be such that the amount of money they have to pay their soldiers compared to the amount of money the Americans, I don't know, but they're still at 12 times. The U.S. spends much more per capita than China. Canada is oh wait a minute, Canada is in the middle. The other low ones were Japan and Turkey and Algeria. Canada had $733. All these figures are
USD.
I don't like. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. My monitor just died until I pressed the keyboard and didn't come back. I was worried. Canada, $733. That's roughly 1/4 of the expenditure per capita of the United States. So when Trump talks about his Canada thing, like, I don't like the way he lays out the question, but I suppose if you compare those numbers, he may have a point.
Well.
We're
US has
1/10.
like-
We're only 1/10 of the population.
And
Yeah.
they've got
1/8.
800 foreign bases to.
But this is,
you know,
Yeah, this is
nuclear-powered submarines.
Per capita.
dollars per capita. So the U.S. like everybody in the U.S. is spending 4 times more than a Canadian.
Right.
Well, it just shows that imperialism is more expensive than sub-imperialism.
Right.
It's just,
Right.
it's-
And they're not
What are
protecting
they calling
anybody.
that?
No.
Mature capitalism?
uh,
Very polite.
There's a bunch of countries that are within about $1,000 to $1,300 per capita per year. Russia, 1034, Germany at 1053,
Yeah.
United Kingdom at 1169, Poland at 1,000, Australia at 1252.
Like on that chart, they're like the middle ones, you know?
Yeah, those are like the middle ones. Never too low nor too high.
Yeah.
So like we could say that an average industrial company a country that's not involved too actively in war is spending about $1,000-$1,200 per person per
They're
year.
NATO driven.
Pardon?
They're
Yeah,
NATO
Right.
driven. They're NATO driven.
Not all, not all.
Well, there's countries that are not in NATO that are in NATO. They're vassals. They're American vassals is what they are. So for example, Japan, Turkey.
well, Turkey is in NATO.
Yeah, well, okay,
Yeah.
and it's vassal. So there you go. Saudi Arabia is a vassal, but it's not in NATO. United Kingdom is in NATO, but it's also a vassal. So
Australia,
huh? Australia and Canada.
Israel.
Yeah,
But this is only the top 20 out of a list of 100.
true.
Yeah.
So
everybody's-
everybody's doing this. Everybody. These are just the top 20.
Yeah, but this top 20 count for something like
Mhm.
either 80 or 87%, I forget which row it was,
Right.
of the world expenditure. So
And the word.
talk about these, we're talking about something that's substantial. Talk about Monaco, well, it doesn't really count for much.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, although we're going to talk about the world's largest military spenders, I'm talked about that already. Although there were armed conflicts or growing interstate tensions all over the world in 2024, the steep global increase in military expenditures was driven by a relatively small number of countries. Like, I think that's an important thing to do. Like those 20 countries, maybe not even all of them, account for the vast bulk of the increase in military expending. The two largest spenders, the United States and China, accounted for almost half of the world's military expenditure in 2024. Together, the top 15 spenders in 2024 accounted for 80% of global military spending, that is 2.185 trillion, and for 79% of the total increase in spending over the year. All 15 increased their military spending in 2024. The two largest year-on-year increases amongst the group were in, yes, Israel, 65% year over year, and Russia, 38%, highlighting the effects of major conflicts. Oh, geez, what happened here?
Just gotta check something.
I click cancel. Okay, how am I going to look at breaking it down? Regional trends?
Give me a moment. Sorry, I'm getting back there. One moment here.
So, and I'm not expecting, people to be able to make any absolute predictions or anything here, but I mean, the last time and whenever we see this type of increase around the world in this kind of spending, it hasn't led to good things, generally speaking. Do you think that this is a sign that we're leading to something greater than what we see now as far as violence is concerned?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Okay, countries in the Americas accounted for 40% of global military spending in 2024. Oh, that's a typo there. It says 2004, but it should be 2024. Followed by the countries in Europe at 26%, Asia and Oceania at 23%, the Middle East at 9%, and Africa at 1.9%. More than 100 countries increased their military spending in 2024. You can take from that there's 193 countries in the UN, that quite a few countries, less than half, but quite a few countries held their own military spending or actually decreased. So paying attention to which countries are increasing their spending is significant. Okay, military expenditure, this is in the Americas. Military expenditure in the Americas totaled 1,100 billion in 2024, an increase of 5.8% from 2023 and 19% from 2015. In 2024, North American military spending rose by 5.7% to just over $1 trillion, which was 19% higher than in 2015. Anyway, if you look at all those, you end up with South American. Let me go on and then we'll talk about it. At 997 billion, U.S. military expenditure was 5.7% higher than in 2023 and 19% higher than in 2015. The U.S. remained by far the largest spender in the world, allocating 3.2 times more than the second largest spender, China. The U.S. accounted for 37% of global military spending in 2024 and 66% NATO spending. Okay, maybe the point I want to make is move to somewhere else. But if the total spending of the Americas is 40%, and that of the United States is 37%, there's not much left for the rest of us. Canada has 1.1%, and Mexico has 0.5%. So like the other 30 countries or so in Latin America and the Caribbean are only accounting for about the. Is that mine? Let me I'm gonna skip through a bit here because you can read it yourself. Yeah, it talks about the supplemental spending and stuff like that. Canada's military expenditure went up 6.8% last year and 38% over the last decade. Canada spent $29.3 billion or 1.3% of GDP on the military last year. The government has pledged to increase military spending to 2.0% of GDP by 2027. Okay, the next paragraph is that paragraph I was talking about, Mexico and that. Mexican spending has gone up because the US is demanding that they spend a lot of money on fighting their drug gangs and that. So Mexico has increased its spending quite a bit, but that's why. Yeah, and in Colombia, there's been some. Oh, geez. Military expenditures by NATO members. In 2024, military expenditures by the 32 North American Treaty Organization members totaled 1.5 trillion, equal to 55% of world military spending. Taken together, European NATO members spent 454 billion, or 30% of total NATO spending. NATO spending of all NATO members was 8.9% more in 2024 than the previous year, and 31% more than 2015. All NATO members increased their military spending in 2024, except for Iceland. Iceland doesn't have an army. They don't have any military spending. I like them already. They should just leave NATO. Anyway, on the average, NATO members spent 16% more than in 2023. That's a lot. Ranging from 0.4% for Spain to plus 43% for Romania. Over the decade 2015 to 24, the 28 countries that were part of NATO in 2015 increased their military spending by 107% on average, ranging from 19% for the US to 272% for Lithuania. One thing I might notice is like, why is U.S. Increasing its military expenses the least of NATO and making all these demands on all the other countries? Well, the U.S. has spent a lot more of its government revenues on military historically. So they're really not saying that they want to increase their spending. They want everybody else to raise their spending to the
Right.
American.
And again, what they're forgetting is the Americans have to keep their people in Europe. Europeans already there. They don't have to pay to ship their people over and insurance and all that stuff that's attached to it. You know, the Americans have put themselves in this place and blame other people all the time. You know?
It's endemic of empires.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
it's
So,
one thing to build up your empire, right? It's a completely something else to maintain it, right? So for example, the F-35, right,
right.
is the most expensive platform in the history of like a military
Just about
expenditure.
anything, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. Right? So they're gonna get a lot less, all right, but it's gonna cost them a lot more, right?
But that's the point.
Yeah, I guess that's.
The point is not to produce effective military weaponry. The point is to absorb surplus in such a way that it doesn't create crisis for the system.
Mhm.
Okay, you've got what conceivable threat do any of us have?
Exactly.
But the only threat this country has is them. You know? And that was the standing orders of Canadian military throughout the 1920s.
Mhm.
The only conceivable threat is the United States, and we should be protecting ourselves against them.
And the thing is,
That's-
right now, right, the empire is destroying itself.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, this is what happens with all empires, right? It's in order it is destroying itself, right?
Mhm.
In every sense of the term.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is a symptom.
Right, oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
They're in the Caligula phase right now.
anyone that believes like Biden was any better, right, is delusional, absolutely delusional.
Okay, there's a little bit of information there about the contribution of NATO members as a percentage of GDP. They're supposed to contribute at least 2.0% in 2024. 18 countries passed that last year, up from 11 in the previous year. The total military burden, or the average military burden of NATO members in 2024 was 2%, ranging from Luxembourg's 1% to Poland's 4.2%. NATO members' military spending as a share of government expenditure averaged 4.9% in 2024, ranging from Luxembourg's 2% to the US's 9.1%. The military expenditure per capita of all NATO members was $1,528 last year, up from $970 in 2015. So that's about a two-thirds increase. All we're saying is like military spending is going up and up and up.
Well, and the like the social healthcare systems in Europe and Canada are going down and down and
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, but that's the point.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
want.
I mean, they keep on even in Canada, right? Even in Ontario, right? They keep on closing like hospitals. It's, you know, they can't afford apparently to pay nurses, but they sure can afford that, you know, that white elephant, the F-35, you know, who we're buying from an enemy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
who we're buying from someone that wants to invade us.
Mhm.
And they have the, well,
We might consider the far superior Chinese fighter.
Yeah.
the F-35, the US evidently has
Not a
the
superior.
ability to sort of press a switch and disable the planes that they sold to Canada. So they're totally useless in terms of defending the country Canada from the US. But we got to spend $60 billion or whatever it is. Anyway, and the Middle East military expenditure reached $243 billion last year, an increase of 15% over 2023 and of 19% over 2025. Saudi Arabia was the biggest military spender in the Middle East and the seventh largest globally at $80.3 billion. But spending was only 1.5% higher than 2023 and 20% lower than 2015, again, because I said they lost a lot of oil revenue. Israel's military expenditure grew by 65% last year to reach 46.5 billion, the largest year-on-year increase since 1967. Israel's military expenditure increased by 135% over the last decade. Military spending as a share of GDP rose from 5.4% to 8.8%, giving Israel the second highest military burden in the world behind Ukraine. Yeah, in 1 month, December of last year, alone, Israel spent $5.7 billion on military. So, like, the military expenditures are becoming, shall we say, substantial, but whether they are maintainable in the long run is dubious.
That's 5.7 billion in December alone.
1 month, yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah, but it's not their money. It's American taxpayers.
Still, they spent 5.7 billion, whatever. Like, that's just incredible. They're the ones.
I think this is their money, not the American money is not counted as part of this. That's my understanding anyway.
Like, that was all
Add the
American
American money to this.
I mean, funds are fungible though.
Still, it's the amount that's actually being spent in a month that is killer, wherever they get the money. from.
True,
So
that's
just
true,
what they're spending.
Okay, go on. Military expenditure in sub-Saharan Africa. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, the next paragraph there is I'm talking about this. I don't know what the dispute is between Algeria and Morocco, but the two countries in Africa that have the highest military expenditures by far. So that's something to check into.
The Western Sahara.
Yeah.
It's a disputed region that's not disputed. It belongs to the Sahrawi people, right? And in the same way that Israel occupies Palestine, Morocco occupies this
Polisario Front.
The Polisario Front are the military
The resistance or
the resistance.
the equivalent to Hamas.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. This military expenditure in sub-Saharan Africa was only $21.9 billion in 2024, down by 3% from the previous year and 13% from 2015. So to notice that some parts of the world is actually decreasing the military spending is good. The overall drop in 2024 was primarily due to falling spending in South Africa, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. Military spending by South Africa, the biggest spender in the region, fell for the fourth consecutive year to 2.8 billion, which was 6.3% less than 2023 and 25% less than 2015. This is important. This reduction aligns with South Africa's fiscal strategy to prioritize economic growth and social services over military spending. I would say that, in my opinion, that's a policy we should encourage from all countries where possible, not
Yes,
just
but-
where possible.
There will be regime change soon then.
Pardon?
South Africa?
Yeah.
I mean,
Because
if
the
you
States doesn't want that.
no,
No.
they've declared South Africa an enemy state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very pro-Palestine
Oh yeah.
and there's no apartheid.
Well, I guarantee you, if you looked at a graph of like military spending after the fall of apartheid or in South Africa, it would be like on it's a downward trajectory, right? So because they're not invading other countries, they're not trying to, they're not trying to dominate, you know,
Blacks and
yeah,
stuff.
exactly,
Right.
yeah.
Well, that's really interesting.
Okay, Asia and Oceania. I don't think I'm
Oceania.
pronouncing Oceania right, but
Oceania.
Oceania, A and O. Spending was up by 6.3% from 2023 and 46% from 2015, a continuing an uninterrupted upwards trend dating back to at least 1989. The year-on-year increase in 2024 is the biggest since 2009, reflecting heightened tensions across the region, especially in East Asia. They might want to include India and Pakistan. Military expenditure in East Asia increased by 7.8% in 2024 to reach 433 billion. It talks a little bit about Japan, which has increased quite a bit to 21% over the last year, 49% over the last 10 years. But it was relatively low, so the number before that, so the overall numbers are not particularly high, but they're going in the wrong direction. The annual increase in 2024 was the largest since 1952 and raised Japan's military burden to 1.4% of GDP. This aims with Japan's military build-up plan, focusing on long-range strike capabilities and air defense systems. Japan spent $13 billion on such systems in 2024, including US-made long-range attack missiles. Excuse me, I got hiccups. There's a bit of information there in South Korea. Again, their military expenditures are increasing. And they mentioned Myanmar, which for a small country had $5 billion in military spending last year. So,
Oh, they're in civil war all the time.
yeah. Europe, total military spending in Europe rose by 17% last year to 693 billion and up 83% from 2015, which is probably the part of the world which has the largest increases in military spending. The Russian-Ukraine war, which is in its third year in 2024, continued to drive military spending upward, pushing European spending beyond the level recorded at the end of the Cold War. All European countries increased their military spending in 2024, except Malta. Military spending in Central and Western Europe grew 14% to 472 billion last year, making an increase of 59% in the last decade. The U.S. increased its military expenditure by 2.8% to
UK.
81.8 billion, equivalent to 2.3% of GDP.
That was the UK.
That was the UK, yeah. I think we can jump over the next little section. Basically, I forget what this. Basically, this is talking about how the increase in America and military spending has resulted in decreases in other spending. For example, the UK also pledged to support Ukraine with $3.8 billion a year in military aid, including financial assistance and equipment until at least 2030.
Where are you seeing this?
I moved along a bit.
There at the bottom.
Next slide.
There it is.
Okay.
UK.
Yeah, so I'm skipping a bit here. Can you find a paragraph that says military spending in Eastern Europe?
Yep.
That one, yeah. Military spending in Eastern Europe rose by 24% in 2024. That's a lot. That's by to 221 billion, the highest level since the breakup of the Soviet Union. The increase was mostly driven by rising spending in Russia and Ukraine. Military spending in Eastern Europe grew by 164% over the last decade. Ukraine's military expenditure last year grew by 2.9% to reach 64 billion, equivalent to 43% of Russia's spending over the year and 54% of total Ukrainian government spending, which is a lot. Which is a lot. Is over half of the Ukraine's government spending is going to the military. Um, Now I've highlighted, bolded a section here which I thought important. Ukraine had by far the highest military burden in the world. Its military spending as a share of GDP was 34% in 2024, down from 37% in 2023. All Ukraine's tax revenues were fully absorbed by military spending in 2024, while its non-military socio-economic spending was funded by foreign aid. Ukraine received at least $60 billion in financial military aid in 2024, mainly from the US as well as Germany and other European countries. SIPRI includes military aid in the spending estimate of the donor country and not the beneficiary country, which means that the $60 billion is not included in the total for Ukraine. If it were included, Ukraine's military spending would have totaled $125 billion in 2024, making it the fourth biggest military spender in the world. I think that shows the huge trouble that the Ukraine has got itself into. That its ability to wage a continued war is it can't be sustained. It can't be sustained. No, like even Israel at 8.2% of government spending for military is huge, and I don't think can be sustained. But 34%, like something's got to go. I don't want to get into which side or whatever, but those numbers just lead that something is I gotta go.
Ukraine's a war of attrition, and Israel's just bombing civilians, basically. So
Okay, China, world's second largest military spender, allocated an estimated 314 billion in 2024, up 7% from 2023. Largest year-on-year percentage increase since 2015 and the 30th consecutive year of growth. The longest unbroken streak recorded for any country in the SIPRI military expenditure database. Chinese spending went up 59% over the decade 2015 to 2024. Chinese rising spending is largely driven by its long-term goal of modernizing its military across all domains by 2035. It unveiled several improved capacities in 2024, including new stealth combat aircraft, uncrewed aerial vehicles, and uncrewed underwater vehicles. China also continued to rapidly expand its nuclear arsenal in 2024 and moved to strengthen certain types of counter space and cyber warfare capabilities. It established separate aerospace and cyberspace forces in 2024. So China is active. 30 years of continuous increase is something that can't be ignored. At the same time, if we remember that its military spending per person per capita was the lowest of the top 20. So they are probably benefiting from their large population. They don't have to take that much money from each person. When you have a lot of people, you can accumulate a lot of money. Okay, this is getting to be a lot. India, fifth largest military expenditure, $86 billion, up 1.3%, 1.6% from last year, 42% from 2015.
Those numbers are gonna change this year.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting here, India, which is one of the world's largest arms importers, has put in place a policy aimed at reducing its reliance on arms imports. The policy, which earmarks 75% of Indian capital outlays, equivalent to 22% of total military spending, to fund domestic military procurement, has made significant progress over the years, with India now able to produce armored vehicles, helicopters, and submarines. However, it remains reliant on import for advanced systems. It's interesting that they made a government decision to limit the purchase of foreign, which is probably mainly US and Russian, military equipment, and to build their own domestically.
They became an official arms seller this year. They've got missiles now, the Brahmin missile that they are now selling to countries in Asia.
Gee, I wish we had thought of that.
And I think the last country I'm talking about here is Russia.
Yeah.
No, Africa too. Russia, total military expenditure last year, 149 billion, 38% more than the previous year, double that of 2015, the equivalent to 71% of GDP and 19% of total. Those numbers don't quite jive. They should be the other around.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Anyway, let's just say they were substantial for now and check them. Russia's military budget has become increasingly opaque since the invasion of Ukraine. Around 30% of budgetary spending was marked as classified in 2024. Russia's actual military spending in 2024 is likely to be higher than the $149 billion estimated here. Anyway, there's been some additions too. So yeah, Russia is not as stretched as Ukraine and India and Israel, but it's getting stretched in terms of the amount of resources it has to put.
Well, it's also under a whole bunch of tariffs and things from the US and things as well. Like their ability to their ability to import things and everything has been severely curtailed. So they've got problems on top of simply procurement. It's much
what I've read is that they've largely been able to
Work around them.
work around the sanctions.
They've actually created a much more self-sufficient economy than they had before. That was the main effect of the sanctions, you know.
Cheapers. Boy, it's such a funny thing. You know?
Okay, Africa. I think this is the last area.
You've already done Africa.
We've already done Africa?
Yeah.
There's
we did
a
some
section here
Africa,
that I can go through and delete. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
System work.
Military burden as a share of GDP, did we redo that?
Well, we took we did that,
Okay, this is a summing up of the first half of this lecture.
yeah.
The graph.
Yeah, the this concept just goes through this concept of the military burden as a share of GDP. Um, estimated to be 2.3% in 2023, 2.5% in 24. And it says here, countries affected by armed conflict spend 4.4% of their GDP on military in 2024. Countries with no armed conflict spent only 1.9%.
That was something I wanted to ask about Africa, though. Does it mention Sudan and what's going on there?
I don't have any information at my fingertips.
Yeah, because that's been nasty for a while.
This list, I copied the top 20. They give the top 40, but that's 160 countries that are not included. And I don't think South Sudan was there, but I don't know.
And again, it's a civil war, so these things often don't get counted.
Okay, that's the first section. Any questions or discussion?
No surprises there.
Painfully clear.
Yeah, it's painfully clear that the world is going mad spending money on weapons which have no useful purpose. And only
I would suggest that the problem is the world leaders are confronted with problems they don't know how to solve, so they're going to blow the place up. It's,
Well,
we don't agree with that, so we want to see if we can do something about that.
I think China's increase has a lot to do with.
Pardon?
So I said I think China's increase has a lot to do with being surrounded by U.S. military bases.
and by
right.
the American pivot towards Asia, towards
Yeah.
China,
Yeah.
by the
NATO's pivot, really.
Yeah.
probes into the South China Sea,
Yeah.
the ramping up of nuclear weapons on Australia. I mean, there's a whole.
2 days ago, global debt hits record of over $324 trillion. Banking trade group says, that's Reuters.
What comes
So-
after trillion?
So who do we owe it to?
Spent it, what was it spent it on?
$324 trillion.
Yeah, what was it spent for?
Kind of puts your credit card in
Doesn't
context.
That's the global debt.
The global debt. Well,
It's a record.
That's a different question altogether.
Again, how's that calculated?
Okay, the global armaments manufacturing industry. One thing to notice of those total military expenditures of basically two components: operating expenses and procurement, purchase of new equipment. For the U.S., it's about 22% procurement, purchase of new equipment, and 78% operating expenses. The salaries for the soldiers, for the cost of the camps, the cost of moving around the world here and there, the training. Anyway, okay, and the it's $1 trillion, and it's dominated by U.S. corporations. 100 largest arms producing and military services listed by SIPRI, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, has arms revenue of
Which totaled 632 billion in 2023, an increase of 4.2% in real terms compared with 2022. Let me change my.
okay.
What happened?
Yeah. This list is not totally complete. It only has information on two Russian companies, and there was several before the war in Ukraine. We said earlier the information from Russia is what they call opaque. Um, you can, if you want to add 102 or 103, like
But
there would be another, there probably should be another couple of Russian companies in there.
The same could be said of the United States, though.
Pardon?
They're not, like transparent about their military spending, though.
No, it's hidden in all kinds of ways. So
Sorry?
it's hidden in all kinds of ways.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Arms revenues went up in all regions. The total arms revenues of the 41 top 100 companies headquartered in the United States grew by 2.5% to $317 billion in 2023. This information I have on companies is 2023. The information I was giving earlier on countries was 2024. I was just told last week that that database was there, so I had to spend the week incorporating it into this project. But it's actually quite useful information to have both by country and by company. It shows you more of a complexity. The 27 European countries in the top 100 recorded arms revenues of 0.2% to reach 133 billion. The arms revenue of the two Russian companies for which data was available went up by 40% to an estimated 25 billion. The 23 companies based in Asia and Oceania increased their arms revenue by 5.7% to 136 billion. At 103 billion, Chinese companies had the second largest aggregated arms revenues after US companies. However, they recorded the lowest level of growth, 0.7% since 2019. Companies in South Korea, 39% increase, Japan, 35% increase, and Taiwan, 27% increase. Middle East countries saw an aggregate increase of 18%. Yeah, most of the areas of the world, the armaments manufacturers companies were increasing. Notice that no companies from Africa or from Latin America.
Africa it mostly imports their weapons.
Yeah.
Quite a
No,
lot of,
anyway, I'm just pointing out
from
that
Spider's point of view, a while back, quite a lot of the weapons that are going to Ukraine are into Sudan are coming from Ukraine.
Yeah.
They're passing through. That's part of the high cost of Ukrainian wars, the corruption that's involved in the arms trade there.
no, most of this is being financed by the UAE and Egypt.
Not quite.
Egypt
They're
wants
buying
to
the arms from
destroy
Ukraine.
Egypt wants to destroy the African Union.
Oh, yeah.
And Russia's participating
Oh,
in
yeah.
that. That's why Russian militias are there.
Oh, yeah, it's complicated, but
Yeah, but say.
there's a whole lot of complicated.
Ukraine's not involved in massing and passing weapons. They're
Oh, yes, they are.
Just-
Oh, yeah, they
Yeah.
are. Absolutely.
anyway,
Anyway, let's,
okay, well, while we're talking about Israel, the earnings and revenues of the three companies in the top 100 based in Israel reached unprecedented levels in 2023 on the back of demands for weapons fueled by the war in Gaza. The aggregate arms revenues went up 15% to 13 billion. In 2023, the arms revenues of Elbit Systems, which is an Israeli company ranked 27 in the world, rose 14% to 5 billion. It reported that it got $900 million of military-related domestic contracts in the last 3 months of 2023. Israel Aerospace had a 15% increase, and Rafael had a 16% increase. So all three of the Israeli companies that are in the top 100 increased by about 16% in their revenues. And when we see the 2024 data as opposed to 2023, just includes the last or the beginning of the war. 2024 is the whole year. I think those numbers are going to be tremendously increased. Okay, here's a table. This table sort of summarizes some of the information we had. The top 100 arms manufacturing companies by the country of domicile. The US, 41 companies, $316 billion in revenues, 2.5% increase from the previous year, and they were 50.3% of global, global military sales. China, 9 companies, $102 billion, and 16%. United Kingdom, 7 companies, $47 billion in revenue, 7.5%. And then as the companies are listed down here, they go down in terms of their share of total 100 arms revenues. There is one Canadian company. Okay, it's not listed in this table. There is one Canadian company in the top 100, a company called CAE.
Yeah.
Canadian Aeronautics Engineering or something like that. It was formed after the end of the Second War. It's not really an arms manufacturing company. It's what they call a service company. It does training.
Flight simulators, I think, mostly.
Flight simulator, yeah. It has a wide variety of training. Yeah, flight simulators are one of the first things they developed.
One of the first, but also the biggest, I think, now.
Pardon?
One of their biggest, like, niche products.
So
Yeah.
they don't fight wars, they promote wars.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a difference.
Anyway, yeah, Israel has 3 companies. They had $13.6 billion in revenue, up 15% over the previous year. And they have 2.2% of the revenues of the top 100 companies. Now, Israel is almost 10 million people. It's just over 1,000 for the world's population, but it has, which is 0.1% of the world's population, but it has 2.2%, more than 20 times is per capita what it should have if everything was equal on a per capita basis.
Well, that's because it's actively supported by Europe and North America. Well, except for Mexico. Like they actively try to integrate Europe into like military supply lines. So that's why.
And they're known for like things like spy software, things like this, that are being sold all around the world. The RCP has admitted they're using it. The police admit they're using it. This is facial recognition software and things that comes directly from Israel. So, I mean, they're big specialty.
But my point being though is if they weren't being supported by Europe and the US and
Right.
North America,
Yeah.
they'd be digging their holes to get water.
Good.
Like everybody else in the region, this is totally unnatural, completely unreal.
Okay, if you want to move up a little bit the other way, there's a list of this one here. There's a list of, the top 20 companies in this top 100 list. If anybody wants to look up the rest of the companies, they can look up CIPRI on the internet. But this,
Is CAE here?
pardon?
CAE, is it here?
CAE is not on this chart, but its number is 78 or something.
Oh, yeah, it's on the top 100.
Pardon?
We actually made the top 100.
Yeah, there's one Canadian company in the top
Oh, I didn't
100.
even think they were.
What an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, this table, the chart is quite useful, quite interesting. It gives the largest worldwide armaments manufacturers, and the five biggest: Lockheed Martin, RTX, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and General Dynamics, are all American. And together, those five companies account for $200 billion of armaments revenues a year. And it shows you most of them are. Boeing is only 40% military. It has the commercial airline section. It's RTX is 59%, but Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, are at 90 and the 90% are being totally American company. Company number 6, BAE Systems, is an English company, and it is almost as big as those. Well, number 4 and number 5 anyway. And 98% of its revenues are from military applications. 7, 8, 9, and 10. 7 is a Russian. 8, 9, and 10 are Chinese companies. I don't have much information about them. If you go down into the bottom 10, or the numbers 11 to 20, mixture in the United States and China,
And you're,
as an Italian company and a French company, and Airbus, which they classify as trans-European, that is, it's owned by several. But the thing I got here is, and I'm going to continue looking at it, is what I call the Big Five armaments manufacturers company. Those American companies that they just make most of the weapons in the yeah. Okay, yeah, and I got a little mention about CAE, the only Canadian company in the CPRO 100. It placed number 82 with $1.37 billion of arms revenues in 2023, down 3.5% from the previous year. Okay, so that is my first half, my smaller half. Maybe let me go through. I made some conclusions up. I showed you some of these before. Like let's go through this information that we just gone through, but in a different way. Like for example, number 1, the United States has 4.2% of the world population. It accounts for 37% of the world's military expenditures and 50.3% of the revenue of the CPRA top 100 armaments manufacturers. So that's showing the dominance, large-scale dominance of U.S. armaments manufacturers. Especially in relation to the population.
well, they have a high power to maintain.
Pardon?
They have an empire to maintain.
Yeah, no, but that's not a rational. That's a rationale. That's not a reason. Number 2, China has 17.2% of the world's population. That's just over 4 times that of the United States. But it's 12% of the world's military expenditures. That's a third of the United States. and 16.3% of the revenues of the CIPRA top 100 armaments manufacturers. That's a third of the United States. So it's interesting when they talk about China being this big military threat to the world. If you look at some of these numbers, it gives you a little bit of how do you express it?
Contact,
Pardon?
contact.
That context. That's a good way. A little bit more context. Canada has 0.49% of the world's population, roughly one half of 1%, but it has 1.1% of the world's military expenditures. That's twice as much as you would expect on a per capita basis if they were distributed evenly, and 0.2% of the revenue of CIPRA top 100 armaments manufacturers. One thing that will come up later, I'm probably not going to have time for it, but is that Canada does not have its own armaments manufacturing industry. Like CAE is the biggest military-related company, but it's really not a manufacturer, a training company.
More services.
There are quite a few, like I have a section of several pages of information on the activities of those big five military, well, the big five armament manufacturers companies in Canada. So it's not Canadian companies that build arms. It's American company subsidiaries that build arms.
Yeah.
Well, that's something we should be aware of. Israel, number 4. Israel has the world's highest military expenditure per capita at $4,835 per person. The United States was second at $2,873, followed by Saudi Arabia and Ukraine. China has the lowest military expenditure of the 20 countries with the highest total military expenditure at $222 per person. Canada spends $733 per capita on military expenditures in 2023. If anybody wants to comment on any of these points, feel free. Countries in the Americas accounted for 40% of global military spending in 2024, followed by the Europe 26%, Asia 23%, the Middle East 9%, and Africa 1%.
I just want to say, like, Canada's per capita should be cut in half, and that entire half should be spent all in Canada.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you get the same production that you spend with double. That if you cut it in half and spend it all in Canada, you'd get the same amount.
Well, whether Canada should be spending large amounts of money on military purposes, like we mentioned that like South Africa had decided to reduce its military spending and increase its social spending. I think that's a great idea. And that should be encouraged and as an example of it, and like it can be done. That we're not tied into this. Well, during the Cold War, it was 0.7% that we had to have for military. And then with Iraq War, it went up to 1% and then 2%. And now Trump is talking about 5%.
It's based on nothing.
Pardon?
It is based on nothing.
Yeah, it's based on like the other guy is bad. So
no, not even that. We're going to tell you the other guy is bad because we want to increase the profits for the merchants of death, as my grandmother used to call it.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, they're baby eaters.
all of them. Yeah. I mean, I was just reading a thing the other day about the history of Russophobia. and it begins in its intense modern form in Britain in the 1830s. And it takes the same form over and over again. Bolshevism had nothing to do with anything. The Cold War was just the usual pretext for keeping Russophobia going.
Mhm.
You know, and it helped to, you know, keep the working class in line in North America too, as some of us who were there in the 50s will recall. You know,
Who was telling me that like they brought over like Nazi or like fascist miners to
oh yeah,
Yeah.
was that you or
With
Howard?
me then.
Was it you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been doing quite a lot of research on Ukrainian nationalism and on the landing of the 14th Division of Waffen SS Galicia in Canada. That's 4,000 of those, plus their families. Probably about 10,000, roughly 100,000 Nazi sympathizers right after the war. While Jews were still sitting in displaced persons camps.
There's an article from the Sudbury Star. I don't know when it's from, way back, but it talks about that, and they brought over about 1,500 Nazis into Sudbury to counteract the influence of Mine Mill and the unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to
unionization and
Yeah,
the whole
I think that's what I actually got it from was
they
the Star.
they brought quite a bunch of church Finns in as well.
Yeah,
Lefty
I
Finns.
have
Exactly.
I have quite a bit. I have some information on that.
They were pretty-
This is a section
Yeah,
I
they
have
were
on
pretty
the
red pit.
Oh, yeah.
military, but yeah, we did this book there. This is up to 45. It goes through the history of Sudbury and its time
Yeah,
with
yeah,
nickel and
I've
war.
skimmed it.
I think you'll find it good.
Is it okay if I scan this and send it off to the Seniors Climate Action working?
You don't
If
even
you
need to
give
scan
me,
it.
there is a PDF version.
Yeah,
So,
PDF? Okay. All right, so I'll just send it off to them.
Yeah.
They've been working on a smaller pamphlet for.
You know, get in contact with me on Facebook or email, and
Yeah.
I'll send you that.
Sure. Okay, great.
Okay, where did I go?
So I actually, just as a side note, I actually wrote a speech for Nakba Day of 2024, talking about that sack of shit in the Canadian Parliament, Yaroslav Hunka. The guy they gave the Nazi they gave a standing ovation to right here.
He was one of the lesser ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's only way to find this that he didn't die.
This is actually my speech right here. Yeah, that sack of shit got 2 standing ovations in the Canadian Parliament. A Nazi, a full-fledged Nazi,
Yeah.
right? And he wasn't just like a regular Nazi, you know, plain Jane one. He was like the 14th Waffen Division of the Schutzstaffel, right? I mean,
I don't think you have to be a Nazi in this world to be that sociopathic. Like most of the American Congress are the same.
Right.
So what's the difference, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
I think number 4, when you were, I can't
let me go
remember.
back to that. Yeah.
Congress can do Nazi things from, their office, right?
Right, but let's also keep in mind, Canada knows that there are several Nazi subgroups within our military that they're trying to get rid of. They know that government is supporting 8 Nazi groups within the country, as well as the Wagner group in Africa, another Nazi military. So they're everywhere.
Stop right there, Sparky.
But they're everywhere.
Yes, there are problems with Nazis in Russia, but they're addressing. No, hang on.
The whole American Congress is.
There are active Nazi groups in Ukraine, which really are at the center of the government there.
No, they're not, but there are Nazi groups, but they're out on the edge, putting their lives on the line like everybody else. They're not in the government. The government is made of Jews. Their last prime minister was.
Okay, like we don't want to get bogged up
All empires are evil.
in this.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, okay, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna go back to, it looks like, it's,
Short on time.
28 minutes to 8 here, so, we're gonna get, this
Should
first
wrap up.
section finished. Chapter 9B, I'll tell you what it's about, but we're not
Yeah.
gonna spend much time on it. We're not
We're
gonna
gonna need
have to
to.
do it next month. Number 9. Ukraine spent the highest proportion of military expenditures with 34% of gross domestic product going to military purpose. Israel was second at 8.2%. At 1.3%, Canada was the lowest of the 20 countries with the highest military spending. 10. Ukraine increased its military spending over the last decade with an increase of 1,251%. Poland had an increase of 159% and Israel 135. In Lebanon, in 2024, military expenditures, friggin', I'm gonna lose this. Excuse my language.
I'll finish. 2024 military expenditure by the 32 NATO members totaled 1,506,000,000,000, equaling to 55% of the world military spending. Taken together, European NATO members spent almost $500 billion and accounted for 30% of total NATO spending, compared with 28% in 2023. In 2024, military expenditure by all NATO members was 8.9% more than the previous year and 31% more than 2015. And do you want to finish us off, David?
Okay,
14.
13 or
14.
14.
Yeah.
All NATO members increased their military spending in 2024, excluding Iceland, which is another country I like South Africa. It has no military expenditures. They should just withdraw from NATO. I don't know why it's in NATO, but if it doesn't do military, but anyway. On average, NATO members spent 16% more in 2023 than in the previous year. Over the last decade, the 28 countries that were part of NATO in 2015 increased their military expenditure by 107%. 15. In 2024, total military spending in Europe rose by 17% to 693 billion, up 83% over the last decade. So, yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. I'll show you, well, the other one goes into the U.S. Armaments Manufacturing Company. And did you know that the headquarters of the 5 largest arms manufacturers are all located within 26 miles of each other? One of them is in Bethesda, Maryland, just northeast of Washington, and the other 4 are in Virginia, just south of Washington. But in an hour and 10 minutes, you can drive all 5 of them.
On the map, you see Washington and you see them just got the little wee crowd going all the way around. A bus ride away. They can play golf together every day if they really wanted to.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to show on that is the ownership of these armaments manufacturing companies. If you remember when we were talking about the ownership of the mining companies, BlackRock was big. Well, BlackRock is there, but Vanguard and State Street, they own up to those 3 asset management corporations own up to a quarter of these armament manufacturing companies. So anyway, I guess we'll talk about that next.
This is 9B.
That's 9B, yeah.
No, you're the one you're looking at right now.
Oh, okay. Just get through it, like click through it slowly, so we can just look at.
You want-
well, maybe,
Maybe.
the table for the 5 largest US armaments manufacturers,
Okay,
the ownership of the,
yeah.
by the big 3 asset management corporations. Like Lockheed, the largest is 26% owned by those 3 companies. One thing that I found interesting there, BlackRock is not so big as it is in mining. In mining, BlackRock is the dominant one,
Mm.
and the other 2 are up there. Here's the other 2 are up there, and BlackRock, well, it's on the sheet, but it's keep on going through.
I think we've given them enough taste.
Okay, we'll leave some for that.
There's only so
We want to keep some for next.
Yeah, okay.
There's so much
Let's
bleeding.
stop at this, let's stop at this graphic. I'm 27 companies control the military industrial complex. 30 companies control the entire medical industry. 10 companies control the food supply. 6 companies control the flow of information, that's the broadcasting. And scroll down and they're all owned by BlackRock, State Street and Vanguard. Anyway, we can look into that more next month. I hope you found this interesting and informative. We didn't really talk about nickel, and we're probably not going to talk about nickel too much next. We're going to deal with these armaments manufacturers. But this is where the nickel goes to. These are the companies that it goes to. Vic Fideli, Vic Fideli, the MPP for North Bay and Ontario Minister of Economic Development. He said that 56% of the nickel consumed by the U.S. Department of Defense comes from Ontario. When you're talking about nickel coming from Ontario, that's Sudbury.
We've got most of
So-
North American supply, so.
Like every other piece of military equipment, it relies on material that came from here. And it's being used to drop bombs and anyway. Anyway, as I said, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it informative, and hope you'll come back next month. And if you've got any thing you were going to send me you wanted the PDF.
Yeah, I'll just, I'll
You
message.
can email him, or like you can email no nickel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or you can email PSS, whichever you want, and we'll get.
yeah,
Well,
I'll just,
Yeah, the
I'll just get
nickel
contact
Genocide would
on-
make sense because otherwise it's got to go through you to get to me.
yeah. I'll just
Yeah.
contact you on Messenger.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's not a big book. It's about an hour read to sit down on that. But in my opinion, it's fairly well written and it's fairly informative.
Well, the more we can all the peace groups can get linked up together and be in communication, I think the better.
Agreed. Yeah. No, I agree.
The working group I've been involved with is also having joint meetings now with Science for Peace.
So which group is this?
It's Seniors Climate Action Network, working group on climate change in the military.
Is that the one Kathy Orlando is affiliated with?
No, I don't think she's another. There's so many different groups. No, she's,
Well,
not,
if
she's not
you-
part of the group that I've been involved with. So she might be part of Seniors Climate Action Network.
She's definitely a senior, but
Yeah. I mean,
I'm a senior, so if you email me or messenger me the information a couple of days ahead of time. If I don't have any doctor's appointments, I'll.
yeah, well, that's my situation.
It seems like I have 4 or 5 medical things.
I'm looking at next week and saying, oh my God, no appointments, nothing. 4 days, 5 days in pajamas.
Oh, yeah. While we're here, let's go over some of the upcoming events of the Palestine Solidarity Committee and for the matter, No Nickel for Genocide.
Yeah.
There's no rally this Saturday, right?
There is.
There is.
Yes, there is a rally this
Very
Saturday.
down the south.
Barry Down and LaSalle. Yeah.
Is there a poster for it?
This one right here.
Oh, okay.
So Barry Down, LaSalle, bring pots, and we're gonna bang them.
Bring a
On account
pot.
of the famine that, or not the famine, excuse me, the starvation that Israel is conducting in Gaza.
Oh, like for the kitty, like
Yeah,
for the kitties.
Yeah, pots.
We're
Um,
counting kids now.
We should do that in a place with lots of people.
yeah.
Anyway,
So it's on the intersection of Barry Down LaSalle. It's at 2 p.m. on Saturday, this Saturday. Also, our upcoming Nakba Day events, excuse me. Let me bring it up here. There we go.
Thursday.
you had it.
You had it
I
there.
know, but it's because I'm sharing it into the Zoom so that
Okay.
when we put this on
Is
YouTube.
there somebody on?
No, there's no one on Zoom. No. But this video is going on to YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Recorded.
What was I gonna say? So May 15th, which is the Thursday, we're gonna be meeting at the Grotto of Our Lady of Lourdes. That's at 271 Van Horn. We're gonna be excuse me. I believe Adrian Chenier is gonna give a speech.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do a march, depending on the weather, to Vivian Lapointe's office. And depending on the weather, we're gonna do, we might like go up and down the Bridge of Nations, or we might just go straight to Vivian Lapointe's office, depending on the weather. Weather's not looking pretty good. Anywho, and then we're gonna be giving some speeches at Vivian Lapointe's office. And then on May 17th, which is not this Saturday, but the next Saturday, we're going to be doing our actual event at the Indigenous Sharing and Learning Center at Laurentian University.
That's nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
it is a beautiful building. It's a brand new building, actually.
And nice for them to.
Yeah,
Allow that to happen.
Is it building on the lake before you turn into the university?
no, that's the building,
Living with lakes.
Lakes building, huh?
Oh,
that's, yeah, that's, so the one that we're talking about, let me end the screen sharing.
Near the residences, closer to the
Yeah,
University of Sudbury
close to the front entrance,
front entrance.
right? I think it's called what, the arts building or Parker, not Parker.
Yeah. the
Yeah,
old
Parker.
building.
Yeah, Parker. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I am right.
So remember where there used to be a roadway between the two buildings there?
Well, have your attention, please. The library will be closing in 15
Doesn't look like
minutes.
it used to.
Meeting rooms and
we
study
have to
rooms are
make
now
a draw
closed.
run first to see.
Yeah.
Before.
This is what it looks like.
See,
Right
There
here.
it is, right there.
Yeah.
So
roadside.
this is
Round
the,
hill.
this is the inside of it, right here. All right, that's the inside, and then this is
Wow.
yeah.
Isn't that lovely?
yeah. So
Wow.
this is Laurentian. So it's all in the.
Yeah, that's good. This is the road driving up, and that road continues on. Like
So basically, when you turn into Laurentian,
Yeah.
right, you just keep on going straight.
Yeah.
Right, and you'll see it, and parking is right beside it.
and then on the 24th,
Yeah.
there's
Oh.
showing of
I forgot it. Yeah, yep.
what's that movie called?
From Ground Zero.
Right.
From Ground Zero. Let me bring up a picture of it.
May 24th.
2024.
It's at 2 as well, right?
Yes, it is. Let me.
That's the Indy.
Yes, From Ground Zero. It's a movie. It's basically an autobiography of the genocide in Gaza, done by the Gazans themselves. It's 22 short films.
Oh, wow.
And it's the Northern Ontario premiere of it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow, good for you guys. It was great.
So we got a fairly busy month.
We got a fairly busy month.
We'll see how
Yeah, we were you at No Other Land?
No, but I think I saw something with Gary Kent's. I think he left.
Okay,
He had showing.
so No Other Land, right? We that was the Northern Ontario premiere of that as well. At Indie Cinema. It was packed. It was like,
It was sold out, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was.
yeah, but.
Yeah, if anybody wants to buy a ticket, we haven't sold out this month yet, so
Ground Zero, we haven't sold.
I think there's lots of tickets left. Yeah, we gotta get busy on that. There's what, like $15 each?
$15 each, yeah.
You just contact us.
So are you following our social media? You're on Telegram, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have our Telegram, where is it? There. There it is.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
and then this is where you,
There's a link there. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
I'll check it out.
or contact the AV Cinema to buy tickets. Yeah, absolutely.
Well.
Okay, well, thank everybody for coming out. The library staff are gonna be coming here with the stuff done to get us